So imagine a philosophy that claims humanity's absolute deepest spiritual failure isn't greed and it isn't violence or, corruption.
Right.
The ultimate degradation of the human species, according to the text we're exploring today, is actually the historical suppression of your own sex drive.
Which is just a massive, a total inversion of the traditional religious narrative we're also used to hearing.
Oh, completely.
Because historically, when we talk about seeking the divine, the imagery is almost always about moving away from the physical body,
Yeah,
right?
you think of like ascetic monks meditating on mountaintops.
Exactly. Fasting or taking vows of celibacy. The flesh is usually treated as something heavy, like an anchor tying us to the mundane world.
While the spirit is supposed to be weightless and pure,
Right.
and that upward trajectory away from biology is so baked into our culture that we rarely even question it. But our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a highly provocative, just deeply unorthodox text from 2010 that takes that entire upward trajectory and violently pulls it back down to earth.
It really does. And the article is written by an author named Swifeng.
Yeah, and the title alone tells you we are heading into radical territory. It's called On Sexuality Again, My Outrage at the Term Immoral Lust.
Yeah, he does not hold back. But before we dive in, because of the incredibly stark religious and moral claims Swifeng makes here, we really need to set the parameters for our exploration today.
For sure. Important disclaimer here.
Right, we are not here to endorse this framework, and we aren't here to debunk it either. We're acting entirely as, philosophical explorers.
Exactly. Just mapping out a profoundly unique theological landscape for you, the listener, so you can examine the mechanics of his argument impartially.
So let's jump straight into that opening premise. Shuofeng starts with this diagnosis of the human condition.
And it's a bleak diagnosis.
It is. He argues that since the dawn of civilization, humanity has never truly understood or openly praised sexuality. Instead, we've hidden it, vilified it, cloaked it in shame.
Which he doesn't just call unhealthy. He points to this specific suppression as the actual root of all human degradation.
To demean sex, in his view, is literally to demean the divine itself.
Okay, let's unpack how he justifies such a massive philosophical flip, because he actually has to redefine the very concepts of beauty and purity to make this work.
He does. He doesn't just suggest that sex is a healthy biological function, which is, a fairly common modern view.
Yay.
He elevates it to the absolute pinnacle of cosmic existence.
Wait, really? Like the very top?
The very top. He writes that absolutely nothing in the natural world, not the most breathtaking landscape, not blooming flowers, not even the purest mountain spring water can surpass the beauty and purity of human sexuality.
Wow. He says it is the noblest thing in the universe.
Yeah, he makes a literal equation here. He states verbatim, sex is Buddha. Buddha is sex.
Okay, that is just wild. It's like he's taking the traditional religious telescope, the one we used to look up at the stars or out into the ethereal ether for the divine, and he's pointing it directly into human biology instead.
That's a great way to put it. Under his logic, being prudish, or insulting the act of sex, isn't some noble defense of purity. It is a direct insult to the Buddha.
And he grounds that abstract concept in a very visceral biological reality by comparing it to motherhood.
Exactly. Because humankind originates from sex in the exact same way every individual originates from a mother.
Oh, I see where he's going with this.
Yeah, therefore, if you insult or desecrate the act of sex, Shuofeng argues you are committing an act of profound disrespect. You're essentially desecrating your own origin.
He actually calls anyone who does this an unworthy descendant.
He does.
Think about the foundational values you might have been taught growing up. If you were raised to view intimacy as something inherently private, maybe slightly shameful or purely utilitarian, Shuofeng is pointing a finger directly at that instinct and calling it an affront to creation.
But this brings up a major mechanical question, doesn't it?
Yeah, because traditional religion separates the physical act from spiritual purity so fiercely because the body decays. It has urges. It's messy.
Right, biology is messy.
So how does Swiffing actually reconcile the messy biology of sex with pristine spiritual purity?
Well, he reconciles it through a highly specific interpretation of intelligent design.
Okay, tell me more about that.
For Sufeng, divine proof isn't found in miracles or, burning bushes. It is found right in human anatomy.
Ah, the biology itself.
Exactly. He views the existence of male and female and the natural gravitational attraction between them as a deliberate, intentional gift from what he calls the ancestral Buddha, the greatest creator.
And he gets incredibly granular about this too.
Oh, very. He points to the physical mechanics, the harmonious fit, the size, the biological structure of male and female reproductive organs as undeniable evidence of the creator's benevolence.
So the anatomy is the proof.
And he pairs that anatomical structure with the resulting physical, mental, and spiritual pleasure.
Right. For him, the fact that profound pleasure is the result of this biological interaction is the ultimate proof that the universe actually wants us to be joyful.
He uses a really simple sensory analogy to drive this home. Eyes are designed for seeing, ears are engineered for hearing, feet are built for walking.
So to Zufeng, the sexual organs are not merely plumbing designed for urination.
No, not at all. Their explicit divine purpose is to experience the joy of sexuality.
Okay, but if the underlying logic is that having an organ mandates its use for maximum pleasurable purpose, that creates a massive collision with certain groups of people.
It really does.
What about individuals who are asexual or, monks and nuns who take lifelong vows of celibacy?
Yeah, if the divine mandate is to use the equipment you were given, you have to assume Su Feng takes issue with people who opt out.
Does he?
Oh, he takes immense issue with it. This is where his philosophy departs from any sort of gentle, to each their own pluralism.
Right. He's not very laid back about this.
Not at all. Xu Feng argues that possessing these organs and refusing to use them for their intended purpose is a direct defiance of the Creator's fundamental intentions.
Wow.
He explicitly labels anyone who does this a perverse being.
That is a staggering condemnation. He's saying that by trying to be holy in the traditional sense, by denying the flesh, you are actually breaking the rules of the universe.
His condemnation of celibacy and sexual suppression is absolute. He goes even further, writing that all who degrade, vilify, or suppress sexuality are working against the natural order.
He doesn't hold back on the name-calling either.
No. He actually labels those who attack sex as demons, monsters, and the offspring of the unnatural.
Demons and monsters. So he views the people we historically call saints as the actual villains.
Exactly. And because he views anyone who suppresses sex as unnatural, he takes direct aim at the moralists and religious institutions that have spent centuries preaching against it.
Right. He diagnoses modern society with a deeply inverted value system.
He sees historical hypocrisy everywhere. Throughout human history, the individuals who distanced themselves the furthest from human sexuality were glorified as moral paragons.
While the people who actually embraced what Su Feng defines as the Creator's greatest gift were labeled vulgar or lowly or sinful.
Yeah, and he diagnoses this societal condition with a brilliant phrase. He calls it spiritual schizophrenia.
Spiritual schizophrenia. Consider how often you see this in the real world.
Oh, constantly.
People yearn for intimacy, they consume media based around it, they enjoy it behind closed doors, but then publicly, in their institutions and their speech, they vilify it.
They demand censorship or purity tests.
And Su Feng calls this behavior deeply hypocritical, selfish, and cunning.
Which is exactly why he is so utterly outraged by the specific term immoral lust, which, is the title of the text.
Right.
He entirely rejects the concept that lust can even be immoral. He argues that the phrase itself is a weapon invented by jealous, foul minds to control others.
He uses a very clean comparison here. Eating food is simply eating. There's no such thing as immoral eating.
Food is food.
Right. Therefore, sex is simply sex. Labeling it as immoral lust is a desecration invented by narrow-minded individuals.
I see a logical trap here, though, and I think you do too.
Oh, absolutely. If the act itself is purely divine and there is no such thing as immoral lust, does his philosophy imply that absolutely anything goes?
Right. Does the context of the act matter at all?
Well, Xu Feng addresses this with one of the most vivid metaphors in the entire text. It's the latrine analogy.
The latrine analogy is crucial because it separates the nature of the act from the behavior of the human engaging in it.
Let's break that down for the listener. So imagine the most exquisite, perfectly prepared Michelin star meal.
All right.
That meal represents human sexuality. Now imagine someone takes that beautiful meal, carries it into a filthy public latrine, and eats it sitting on the floor.
Right, or they dump it into a trough and eat it alongside pigs and dogs.
Exactly. Xu Feng says, look, the fact that you ate it in a latrine doesn't mean the food itself is bad. The food remains perfect.
What it reflects is your own terrible personal taste.
Right. Your lack of refinement and your character flaws.
What he achieves with this analogy is a strict philosophical separation between ontology, the inherent nature of a thing, and human behavior.
He is protecting the sacredness of the core phenomenon.
Yes, so if someone engages in sexuality in a way that society finds degrading, harmful, or ugly, Schwarzenegger's framework dictates that we must never blame sexuality itself.
We don't call the desire sinful, we just recognize a lack of personal refinement in the user.
The divine tool remains flawless. The user simply lacks the grace to wield it beautifully.
Which allows him to maintain his stance that true gods and true angels never suppress or desecrate sex. Only hypocrites who wish to control and enslave others do that.
And that leads us to the practical application of his theology.
Right, the how-to part.
Because if traditional religious rituals, fasting, reciting scriptures, taking vows of celibacy are all mechanisms of control built on hypocrisy, what is his alternative path to salvation?
He doesn't just tear down the old institutions, right? He actually provides a highly detailed spiritual roadmap to replace them.
He does. And that roadmap begins with throwing the concept of transcending sexuality right out the window.
He calls it utter nonsense.
Yeah, trying to transcend your biological urges doesn't make you noble. It makes you a despicable hypocrite who leads other people into spiritual schizophrenia.
He even quotes the Buddha to back up his point, stating that observing precepts, giving alms, and fasting do not make one a Buddha.
The only way to seek Buddha is to see one's true nature.
And Sufeng explicitly defines seeing one's true nature as achieving total unity with sexuality.
He argues that the Buddhist concept of the pure land of ultimate bliss, which is, the ultimate destination for enlightenment, can only be reached by merging into the infinite essence of sexuality.
And he breaks this down into 3 sequential steps of cosmic unity.
This is where the text gets incredibly dense and fascinating.
It really does. He takes ancient, incredibly complex philosophical concepts and anchors them entirely in the physical act of human intimacy in a bedroom.
Let's synthesize this journey for the listener.
Okay, so step 1. 2 sexes unite to form Taiji.
Right.
My read on this is that Taiji represents the supreme ultimate, the perfect balancing of yin and yang. It's grounded physical harmony.
It goes back to his earlier point about the biological puzzle pieces fitting together perfectly.
Exactly. You've captured the foundational step. It begins at the interpersonal, tangible level. 2 individuals become one complete system.
But step 2 is where the scale expands dramatically.
What happens in step 2?
Step 2. Unite with heaven to enter the formless, which he calls wuxiang.
Wait, how does physical pleasure in a physical body lead to formlessness? That sounds like a contradiction.
Well, think about the goal of deep meditation.
Okay.
The objective is often to quiet the mind to the point where the boundaries of your ego dissolve. You forget where you end and the universe begins.
Oh, I see.
Wu Feng is arguing that intense physical pleasure achieves this exact same ego death, but far more effectively.
Because the physical sensation becomes so overwhelming that you lose the rigid definition of self?
Exactly. You shed your psychological boundaries. The physical body becomes the vehicle to escape the physical body.
You transcend the biology by going entirely through it rather than trying to walk around it.
Which brings us to the final, ultimate destination.
Right. Step 3. Unite with the way to become chaos, or Honden.
And we need to clarify this because in Western philosophy, we often hear the word chaos and associate it with destruction or disorder.
Yeah, like total anarchy.
But in this context, Honden is the primal, unseparated universe. It is the state of infinite potential before the universe was divided into categories or judgments, rules, moral binaries.
So, by merging with sexuality and passing through formlessness, Shofeng claims you return to the very source of creation itself.
You reach the cosmic blank slate.
Wow. It's a massive, breathtaking roadmap for ultimate human liberation. I mean, he's offering a path to cosmic bliss that requires no monetary donations, no austere living, and no self-denial. But as you're reading the text, riding this wave of total freedom from rigid religious rules, you hit a sudden, incredibly sharp turn.
The tone shifts entirely.
It really does. Shifeng reveals his own identity to the reader, and he issues a final decree.
Yes. The text transforms from a philosophical treatise into a direct, authoritarian ultimatum.
He suddenly declares, I am Deiform Buddha, the messenger of the greatest creator and the embodiment of God, Buddha, and celestial being.
And then comes the hammer.
Yeah. He says, from this day forth, anyone seeking the Creator's way, regardless of their religion, ethnicity, or nationality, must follow his teachings.
The path he guides leads to heaven and diverging from his teachings leads to hell.
It is a profound contradiction that fundamentally alters how we perceive the entire text.
It really is. On one hand, Cixin has just spent pages systematically dismantling the authority of historical religious institutions.
He ruthlessly condemns self-righteous hypocrites who use rules to control and enslave the masses.
He frames his entire philosophy as the ultimate emancipation of human nature.
But then he sets himself up as the absolute dictator of that emancipation.
Right.
How do we make sense of this whiplash? We just talked about returning to primal chaos, a place free of judgment. But he ends by saying, I am the sole authority, follow my exact path, or suffer eternal damnation.
Well, he rejects the old hierarchy only to establish a new one with himself at the absolute pinnacle.
Yeah.
The freedom he offers is entirely conditional upon recognizing his exclusive spiritual authority. He demands liberation, but strictly on his own terms.
It's a fascinating psychological tension. You, as the reader, are invited to throw off the chains of traditional morality, but only if you immediately put on the collar he provides.
And he even builds a defensive moat around his claims at the very end.
Oh, the disclaimer.
Yeah, he adds a final disclaimer warning the reader that this article is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
He insists that you have to read everything he has ever written on the subject of sexuality, or you will inevitably misunderstand him and take his words out of context.
Which is so clever because it serves as a failsafe against criticism.
Right. If you find a flaw in his logic, his built-in defense is simply that you haven't read enough of his work yet.
It ensures that the follower remains tethered to his expanding canon, always seeking the full picture that only he can provide.
What an absolute roller coaster of a text.
Silly.
We started with the argument that human anatomy is proof of divine design, mandating pleasure.
We explored his radical idea that suppressing sex is the true demonic act, and unpacked his diagnosis of a society suffering from spiritual schizophrenia.
We walked through the latrine analogy to see how he separates the perfection of an act from the flaws of human behavior.
We then followed his cosmic roadmap, utilizing intimacy to dissolve the ego and reach the primal chaos of the universe.
Only to slam into his authoritarian ultimatum at the very end.
And as we noted at the beginning, our role today hasn't been to validate his claims of being the deiform Buddha, but to observe this complex architecture of ideas.
And regardless of how you feel about Xuefeng's ultimate conclusions or his demands for obedience, encountering a framework this unorthodox forces a necessary friction. It really does. It makes you stop taking your cultural assumptions for granted.
It challenges us to examine the foundational bedrock of our beliefs.
Where do our deeply held societal values about purity, morality, and nature actually come from? Are they inherent truths of the universe, or are they just inherited habits of civilization?
It really shakes the snow globe of your worldview. Think about that telescope we mentioned earlier.
Right.
If societal definitions of purity and sin have fluctuated so wildly throughout human history, if a philosophy can exist that convincingly argues we should search for the divine in our biology rather than the stars, what current moral absolute that we hold today might look completely upside down to a civilization 1,000 years in the future?
That is a fascinating question.
Something for you to mull over. Thanks for exploring with us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the lens you're looking through.